Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, where we tackle leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Melissa Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group, and this is episode 10. Today, we're diving into a crucial leadership topic, how to build teams that actually work. Hiring great people is just the first step. Ensuring that they're in the right roles with clear accountability and expectations is what makes or breaks a business. I'm joined today by Rainee Busby, the EOS implementer who helped my team dive into the world of EOS, and Misha Homara, CEO of Trior Panels, to talk about how leaders can use EOS and Predictive Index together to build stronger, more aligned teams. Together, we'll dive into the biggest mistakes leaders make when structuring their teams and how clear expectations and accountability prevent burnout and turnover. If you've ever struggled with team alignment, leadership accountability, or hiring the right people, this episode will give you a new lens on solving or preventing those issues in the future. Let's get to it. Let's start with these acronyms. For people who aren't familiar with EOS, Rainee, what is it?
So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So I am a longtime entrepreneur. I wish I would have known that I needed an operating system to run my business. It makes life so much easier. So it is really a powerful model with a complete set of tools to get everything you want out of your business. So we always like to say with EOS, you can achieve three key things, and that's vision, traction, and healthy. So vision means getting everybody laser focused where we're going, how we're going to get there, and how each person contributes. The traction is the key part. That's how we make that vision reality. So it's through discipline, accountability, right? Consistency across the organization, top to bottom. And ultimately, let's build a healthy culture, right? Healthy business. So we get that leadership team firing on all cylinders. And then we say, as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. So we get everybody consistently disciplined, accountable, just making things happen. And it just creates a great company, unstoppable growth. So that's pretty much EOS.
Great. And I'll handle PI acronym. PI stands for Predictive Index, and it's really an EEOC compliant way to get the right people in the right seats and then develop and retain them. So there are no shortage of people who are using a variety of assessments to do pre-hire that are not compliant. More power to you. Hope you don't get caught. But there are a few that are really great insurance policies to really defining in EOS space. We talk about right people, right seats. And in a lot of ways, it's really a reverse of that. It's right seats, right people. We define what are the demands of the roles. Then we get people into those roles who are naturally talented to do those at excellence, do them quickly, kind of a speed to performance, as well as comfort in the role over time. So, Misha, I'm going to turn it to you. And if you take these two concepts and tools and, toolboxes, really, how do they reinforce each other from what you've seen in the business?
Yeah, happy to address that. So we started our, EOS journey first and then added PI. So like when we first started doing the EOS journey, coming up with all the org charts and figuring out what that right person looked like, took some time. And then realizing, we're introduced to it actually from our implementer. And, he shared with us that, this tool is gives you kind of the inside scoop of a person before you kind of, get to know them and really talk to them, because you kind of put it like, when you go on a first date, you're always on your best behavior and you're trying to, show, your best side. So kind of similarly in an interview. So this kind of allowed actually our interview process to become a lot more open, and it's kind of different now, right? Based on each person, where before it was more so like a set series of questions that we would ask and kind of guide the conversation based off of those answers. Now we get like the inside, scoop with PI, where it, gives us, hey, Misha has a personality style that's super flexible, so maybe she won't be the most ideal candidate for, a role that needs to be super precise, but you can ask questions, about how, for example, she can go about, shifting, certain patterns or, her, system of going about things. I know I just gave a really long and big answer, but maybe you can kind of recap that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea that you're just getting this sneak peek into someone and how they operate, because that first date thing is real. And I mean, I'll throw this to you and give you a chance for vulnerability if you want to take us up on it. Were you burned by any great interviewers in the past that maybe could have been sniffed out with an assessment like PI.
Yeah, and we didn't believe the assessment in the beginning, so we learned the hard way too. We were like, no way, like this person is like totally can do it. You know, you learn.
Yeah, live and learn, live and learn. Well, Rainee, you said you've been implementing EOS for 9 years now.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear in your experience, what are the main, there are a bunch of different buckets in the EOS world. What are the main people issues you're seeing today? And what conversations are happening with clients that indicate PI might be worth investigating or investing in?
Yeah, so boy, very consistent. So I've worked with over 75 companies across my 9 years. And it's so funny that they're all kind of saying the same issues, right? But we're hearing turnover, right? So turnover of their top talent, their high performing talent, because we're not having career conversations, being active in that conversation, right? And getting them developed, fast tracked. We're also hearing that we're making bad hires because we're not really planning in advance for what we need and really getting crystal clear on that perfect candidate and then being able to use a tool to match. So a lot of them don't use a tool or they use the wrong tool. Many of these positions that, once we get through the accountability chart and define what are our key functions, and then do we have the right leaders, and we look the next level down because we need the leaders to elevate. But if they don't have the right people below them to delegate, they're not going to delegate, right? And so it stops growth of the company. And so, when I'm saying here's some strategic positions, you need rock stars in here. And so with PI, they're able to truly define what that perfect person looks like. And then we can get the top candidates, right? So the top 80-85% match. So maybe it's 2 or 3 that the hiring manager is then looking at. I was just with a client yesterday and the hiring manager is overwhelmed with resumes. They're just, flipping through them, and I'm like, you don't have time for that. What a huge waste of time. So having a tool like PI, game changer to get our people focused at the level where they can add value.
It's interesting you say that. I was working with a client on Monday in the construction industry last week. Last week? Anyway, it doesn't matter. And he was saying they are not having trouble getting candidates in the pipeline. They've got like 500 people per role that they open up. The problem is finding the needle in the haystack. And resumes alone typically don't get us there. We want to know how they're wired because sometimes experience isn't enough. We want to know, do they have a sense of urgency? I mean, construction projects, if we get behind on schedule, we've got some real penalties that come into play often on these bigger projects. So it's interesting you say that, Rainee, that culling down.
Yeah, I'd add one more thing to that. He made a point yesterday. He said you could take the names off and the resumes all kind of look the same. He said, so how do I differentiate them? And another piece that we're missing in this whole puzzle is integrating core values, integrating those behaviors, characteristics, right? It's not just the resume. The resume doesn't really tell us what we need to know. And so that's another way to truly assess. And Misha mentioned a little bit, how do they really perform, right? When we hire them and then losing those people once we invest time, turnover is a big deal as well.
Such a waste of resources. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Misha, I'll turn it over to you. I've kind of got a 2-part question like I did for Rainee. So one question is, how long have you been on the EOS journey? And what was the trigger that encouraged you to add PI into the mix?
Yeah, so we've been in the EOS journey for a little over 3 years, but in a sense, I feel like we restarted again because I have an entire new leadership team. So actually, we had a question in our last quarterly that who was in the focus day, and it was our founder and I, so my dad and I, and everyone else was new. So I was just like, oh, well, we have been doing it for some time, but in a sense, we're kind of restarting in a way, I would say. So I guess short answer, 3 years. And PI, we brought on board about 1.5 years ago. Our implementer, Bill Wagner, at the time was, sharing, the insight of he did it on us and gave us like a, overview of, why, sometimes we're not able to fully understand what we're, sharing with each other, or, may feel the other person isn't, hearing you. But I think that it really gave us insight of how we can develop the team, more so first rather than interviewing on it. It was really a resource for us, when two people in our team maybe aren't seeing eye to eye or having a hard time communicating, we really use PI and do, I don't know the exact name of the tool. Melissa, this is your
One-on-one
expertise.
relationship guide.
Yeah, that we use that all the time because it really pulls, like, for example, my personality and Melissa's personality, right? And say like, this is, what drives Misha crazy, and this is how, you can better communicate things, and just really gives you kind of guided structure on like how to go about navigating each other, because it's usually the biggest issue is the communication aspect of it, and how to, deliver the message in a way where it's received and understood in the way that you intended it to be. I think PI has been really helpful in just guiding those conversations and creating like a space to have that. Whereas before it was like, well, there's no data in a sense to kind of base these conversations off of.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm a little bit agnostic when it comes to assessments. They all have a time and a purpose. And the thing that matters most is that the leadership team or the founder, visionary implementer, integrator, that they really identify with the assessment. And so what I see the biggest value of our internal staff is it makes it easier to forgive people their trespasses, to forgive the quirkiness, accept them, and kind of embrace those things, because mostly they start off as irritations. Mm-hmm. This person talks too much. This one asks so many questions, it's like they don't want to do anything. I had one client who was introduced to me as first name no. Like he just had this reputation for being a no guy. Well, in StrengthsFinder language, he had like deliberative and analytical and all these risk mitigation talents. But when we flip the script on those and say, well, you realize this is how this helps us not trip ourselves up. Meanwhile, we've got a visionary who's like, build it while we're flying the plane, ready, fire, aim, it's going to be fine. And when we start to have like this idea that stars have sharp points, and they should, and teams can be well-rounded and fill in those gaps, that's when it becomes appreciation rather than irritation. So I love the one-on-one relationship guide for those, and some elements. So if you think back on your PI investment, what value have you seen out of that investment? I mean, you're investing money. Where's the return on that investment coming?
I think one, it helps kind of filter out. We have everyone do a PI when they're applying for the role, and a lot of times people don't want to spend the 5 to 10 minutes just doing the assessment. So that in itself kind of gives you some insight, realistically, of like the candidate and their kind of value in a sense. It also just helps us kind of navigate like those conversations. As I mentioned, we tested the system for a role, and the candidate wasn't the right person for it, but it just isn't. You got to just trust the system, and we kind of learned that in a sense, and it's been really insightful as the relationship.
Oh, we lost your audio, Misha.
Sorry about that.
That's good. Anyway, it's been valuable as you start to trust the system.
Yeah, and gives you really like the inside view, right, of like if a certain behavior would fit into the role. It's not like the person isn't the right person, right? It's just like allows you to see like, is that seat the right seat for them in a sense? Yeah.
Great.
And it also has helped the like leaders and like their direct reports have a easier way of interviewing them, because I think before like interviews were just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. This is like not comfortable. And it's just like, for some people it comes naturally to have the conversation, but for some people it's really challenging. But this kind of what PI does, for those I don't know about it, it gives you like interview questions based on their personality. So it really helps kind of structure some of like those baseline questions, right, that are based solely on like Misha's personality or Melissa's personality. So I think the interviewees feel like it's more structured in a way for them. Like I show them the video usually for the first few minutes of the interview that gives them a read back of their dominance factor and their patience and flexibility, and they're like shocked usually. They're like, how did that like 5-minute thing like read me like that? And it just almost creates like a sense of like relief and kind of breaks down the wall. I feel it's just awkward when you go into an interview. It's not an easy thing. It's like you have you're in an uncomfortable situation, but this kind of breaks the barriers, and it's like, okay, like we're just talking now. And I feel like it just makes the flow of the interview a lot smoother.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about interviews. One of the things that comes to mind is when we had a really, really tight labor market, I was seeing clients use PI to sell the candidate and say, look, you're an extremely strong fit for this role. I have a high degree of confidence you're going to be successful here for a very long time, that you're going to find this role comfortable and rewarding. And very few other employers can say that with confidence, because as a candidate, no one wants to, as an employee, no one wants to suck at work. Even if they do have a job that's not rewarding, they don't want a bunch of gaps in their resume where they're jumping around. Just because we have a generation that seems more willing to jump doesn't mean that's their goal. And so I think it's a really valuable thing. And then in a tighter labor market, or where there are more candidates, it helps us sort through. And, you were mentioning the questions are custom built for their personalities. They're custom built for their personalities and for the potential areas where they are a great fit for the role, and to probe deeper into areas there might be a mismatch. So we can say, do you have experience modifying your approach naturally to where we can have confidence that you can make that stretch? So that's something I've seen.
I'd love to add something to that, is the part that I really enjoy, because many of my clients are talking about succession planning, right? I have owners that are getting ready they want to move up into the owner's box. I don't want to be actively involved in the business. So in order to do that, we need to develop talent, right? So we can't move that leader up until we have somebody underneath. I love that we can have the leader take the assessment, because they're a rock star, right? So now get a true understanding of that person that's super successful in that role. And if you have a couple, like, let's say you're trying to find estimators, you can pick your top estimators, have them take the assessment, and then we have a perfect profile for what that rock star is going to look like. And then they come in and they match up to the PI. And you're like, here they are right here. This is like
let's just clone them. If we could have 10, I had an owner say to me the other day, if I could just have 10 of this person, life would be great. I'm like, great, let's go clone them from an approach perspective. And if you can match that with some resume backup to it, we have a high probability that they're going to speed ramp up pretty quickly.
And core values, you can plug that in too, right? Because when we go through the core values exercise, I have the leadership team identify, tell me your rocks, the people that just live core values and why, right? So we capture all these characteristics and who they are. But what a great way to also take their assessments, integrate that into the tool. I mean, it's just so powerful. I mean, it just takes the guesswork, gut feels, and what ifs and I think's out of the way. And it's real data making great decisions.
I love that. So one of my visions for this discussion was to kind of throw out some tips and tricks, especially for people who are already using one or both of the tools, EOS or PI or both. So I have a couple primers, and I'd love your input as well. So one of them is I had a client, Rainee, you and I both worked with, Janice Mueller at Mueller Environmental, said, God, I wish we had just started with PI when we started with EOS. And I went, wow, that sounds amazing. And also like drinking from a fire hose. And I think it's probably EOS by itself is a big undertaking. PI a little less so, but it kind of, the reason I love to overlap with EOS companies is they're having the right conversations around core values, around right people, right seats. So I'd love to hear from an implementer standpoint, do you think there's a right order and a timing? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so it's really so client specific. Where are they? How strong are they? I can usually figure out pretty much where their issues are going to be, where their challenges are. If you have a pretty strong team who's ready to truly take it to the next level, they probably are using a tool or maybe not the right tool. So it would be a change. But from an implementation perspective, I would say that, we have 3-day kind of cadence of implementations, 1 day a month, right? We can begin. So I introduce, as soon as I find out they're not using, because people issues always come up. What tool are you using? Oh, Disk. So I'm like, not a great tool for that. So here's a tool that my clients are using. It's awesome. Begin the discovery process. So I think there's value in beginning that process right away, but don't really take action. So do a demo, maybe play a little bit, pick a position. And I know you work with them and say, hey, let's do this position. So they can
Yeah,
really
we can dabble. We don't have to jump in with both feet. I love that thought.
Yeah, and then once we complete implementation, then we really know by looking at the accountability chart what positions we need to start targeting first, second, and third with that tool because it's powerful. We wouldn't use it initially on all positions, but I think that's really, create a rock, somebody gets a rock, and then we start launching and hitting all those strategic positions.
Cool. Misha, what about you? What's your perspective on timing? And it seems like Rainee, what I'm really hearing you say is it's a lot about leadership maturity and what they've already been using. So how much of a lift is it to add something like this to the mix? Misha, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, me, I think as a visionary that wants to do everything all the time, all at once. I think I've learned this the hard way before, but I think really getting like your leadership team's support and like ensuring that they're going to be able to like use it, right, and like understand it, and because it's overwhelming if you give them like 20 things at once to do, and they're still like doing their roles, right, and like their everyday kind of tasks. So it's a lot to kind of navigate. So I think baby steps and coming up with a plan of like, in this first year, for example, we're going to roll out EOS and, within the next year, bring on, PI or, whatever other, systems or softwares or, that you're going to want to implement and use. But I think really getting like the buy-in and a champion for it and like who's going to really like own getting this started, because anything that you start, like someone has to do the onboarding, right, like set up all the systems, and someone really has to own it. So I think like having a game plan is like
And an
really
internal
key.
champion, I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
And I think so much of it, Rainey, I'll go back to your people issues. So much of it is triggered by we've got too much turnover. It's costing us a lot of time and money. We've got burnout among key players and we've lost someone or at risk of losing someone. We've got young leaders that we need to help them level up and give them some good tools at their disposal. So it can kind of be business driven, and our quarterly rocks. It's like, okay, well, I had one client that's a managed service provider that their implementer said, you need to just go adopt some assessment. They've kind of got an interesting situation where their implementer, their integrator is more of a visionary and their visionary is more of an integrator. So I think it was a great discussion for the team. And then we overlaid what are their rocks and goals against their talents and saw there were some core goals they had that they didn't have a talent set to match to. So that was a great exercise for them.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is where are the highest pain points, right? So what's holding the growth back? Typically, clients have hit the ceiling when they start working with me. They were growing, they get on a hamster wheel, kind of spinning in place. Why, right? So we start to kind of peel that onion back, as a lot of people say, and look at what's the cause. Is it the turnover? Because if they're losing that person right below them, they have to go down and cover that job. So we never get them to that next level. So where's the pain, right? And then that helps us to decide we need a tool right now, or maybe we can wait a little bit, or we can move at a slower pace. So every client is so unique and different. And I think that's just important to take into consideration.
That's fair. So in the idea of tips and tricks, Misha, do you have any tips and tricks related to these tools that are really supporting your operations and making life more efficient for you and your leadership team?
Yeah, I think kind of just going a little bit off what Ray said, take your time and like, do the demos and like let it soak in, right? Figure out like what's right for you, because what's right for you may not be right for me, may not be right for someone else, right? Figuring out like what is the best, tool system, whatever it's going to be for like you and your team for the success of your company. And I think like being aligned with that and aligned in like that software, that tool, right, that system is really crucial to be able to kind of trickle that down into the rest of your organization. So I think really take the time, and don't jump onto something, right? Really like do your homework, talk to people that, now we're so lucky. We live in like the best time with accessibility, like LinkedIn message someone that's using this tool, right? Jump on a quick call with them and really kind of get feedback of like, how is this impacting others that are in a similar kind of line as you, right? And get the data, collect the data before making the decision, I think is really important.
I love this coming from a visionary maverick. Rainey, we talked a little bit about right people, right seats, or flipping the script on that and making it right seats, right people. That's something both PI and EOS do really well, is that accountability chart versus an org chart, defining the demands of a seat and matching someone against it to see where they might have issues. What can you share about really getting that accountability chart right and how it's different than an org chart?
Yeah, so the accountability chart looks like an org chart, but it has a few different characteristics. We use a functional description, so the titles. We also capture the 5 to 7 areas of responsibility. So you can look at a box, that person's name's in it, and you know high level what they're accountable for. So it's really clear. You can see a visual of the entire organization, which tells us what our seats are. The right people defines the core value alignment, right? So do they fit our core values, right? Do they exhibit those behaviors and characteristics? So right people, right seats, looking at their natural DNA characteristics, do we have them in a seat where they're going to flourish and be super successful? So we look at those two characteristics and we want to bring those together, which is why having a tool that looks at our core values, hire for core value fit, we can train skills, right? So if we look at that core value fit and then make sure we got them in the right seat and then just turn them loose into their amazingness and let them do what they do naturally. We don't need to micromanage. We just have some measurables. They know what success looks like and just go. And that's what's cool about EOS. It creates that environment.
Great. So I'm actually going to grab a question that came in around career pathing. So how have you seen career mapping work while utilizing PI? Best practices, mistakes. So I'll pitch this one to you, Misha. Have you used this for career pathing at all in your growth journey?
Yeah, so we do offer tours of duty where we give people opportunities to kind of sit in different roles and different seats in our company if it's something of their interest. And this is really helpful with kind of thing Rainey was mentioning of creating like what is the ideal, person look like for, estimating or, whatever it could be, right? And you can actually change the job role for each person in PI. So it's nice when you do have these kind of conversations to see, would this be the right fit? And when you're talking with their, leaders, you can kind of have a conversation in regards to like, where could this person, thrive in? And it's definitely something we utilize when it comes to these conversations and our quarterly and annual conversations. It's something that we bring up and utilize and in our team building. It's just it's a tool that we definitely use in all avenues.
It's interesting. I've done this with a couple clients where we built out all of the roles in the entire organization, both current roles and future roles they were hoping to develop and hire into in the next 12 to 18 months. And then PI lets us say for each person as they're coming up for review, are there any other roles this person would be a natural fit for? And so we can start priming them, especially some of our blue collar staff don't see themselves as qualifying for some other roles. But God, if they're a great culture fit, they've been loyal and they've got growth potential, we may be priming them to say, we have this role coming up. I think about your interest in that. And we can proactively prime for an area they have a high probability of success for, which I think is kind of this little gift. Both we can provide them and PI can provide us in terms of little hints. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's one of the best practices I've seen.
Yeah. A huge leadership opportunity. Don't miss it because now you're showing that you care. You're able to give them some really targeted opportunities. Like this is a role, this is a role, this is a role. And to Misha's point, go shadow it, go learn about it. Talk to the person who's doing it. See if it's really something you're interested in. But being able to even create the conversation helps with retention. We got to retain our people, right? Which means we have to understand where they want to go.
And even if we brought them into a role that's kind of an entry level role, and there's a part of it that's not a perfect fit for them, just a little bit of empathy to say, look, I know this isn't your forever role, but you're such a great culture fit. Tolerate this for this tour of duty, whether that's 6 months, a year, whatever. And then the path really is to the next place that is actually a much better fit for you. So hang in there. And that's it's amazing how much time that can buy you in terms of retention when a little bit of empathy to say, I know this part kind of sucks. Yep. And they go, yeah, it does. Okay, it's all right. You got this. And I see you in the next spot. And they go, they just feel so complimented that it's harder to leave and jump to the next opportunity. Okay. So feel free, everyone on the call, to ping in your questions. The next question I'll take is, an example of including PI in your quarterly rocks. How do you weave this in, or is it making it, part of chunking it out, making it stick, leveling up? Misha, you have any examples of?
Yeah, so we just bring in as like a reminder, just, the personality of like the person when we have the conversation and their leader. It's just something that's like, common practice for us that we it kind of eases, like breaks that wall, right? And just like kind of resets the kind of tone of like, hey, like this is, a space for us to kind of learn and grow and like communicate. And that's kind of how we base it off of. If there's any kind of issues or, concerns that we want to address, again, we kind of bring up the patterns and kind of try to figure out like what's going on. So that's kind of how we utilize it. I don't know if there's other ways that the two
Are you
of
saying like if you
can...
stumble on a quarterly goal, we're trying to figure out why and diagnose it? Or as they kick off a quarterly goal, you're using
Yeah, so
PI
like when we do like quarterly conversations, the one-on-one conversations with our team.
Yeah.
So it's like their director, their leader and their direct report typically having those conversations. Yeah.
And I've seen really tactical things like we need to get an assessment in place for team development. We need to get some kind of pre-hire assessment because we're not getting the right people in the right seat. So much more tactical quarterly goals to say it's on me to figure this out this quarter. It's on me to do career pathing, to do, even figure out this one role, get this one right. Rainee, what about you?
Yeah, the thing I would add is looking at competencies, right? So PI does a really good job of showing their gaps. Here's some things that you're going to need to develop. It could be getting in your way. It could be a blind spot that you have. And so that's an awesome opportunity to create a rock for them. Like here's something to work on and usually engage another peer. Like when you see me doing that, right, that behavior that's annoying to people, let me know, kick me under the table, I like to say. And so I think that's an opportunity to really look at personal and professional development, kind of combined for a rock, and of course, lots of ways to create rocks. I love the quarterly conversation, which is when we get with our direct reports, how am I doing as a leader, as a manager? What do you need? Do you have the tools and resources? Let's talk about what the next quarter looks like. And then to Misha's point, let's get in the conversation with what rocks do you want to work on and where do you want to develop? And then you kind of bake in that career conversation too.
Yeah. Well, I know we're just a couple of minutes over time. I'm going to wrap us up. I'm happy to stay if you have more PI or EOS questions, but I want to be conscious of the time we committed to, knowing this could have been a 3-hour conversation rather than 30 minutes. So thanks for engaging in the abridged version of the discussion. So if you'd like to learn more about, bring my contact up. That's right. If you'd like to learn more about EOS, certainly reach out to Rainee. If you'd like to learn more about Predictive Index, that's what I'm here for. And Misha, of course, is at your disposal if you need some construction support, if you need some architectural panels to make something look beautiful. But I just really appreciate everyone's input today and happy to hang for a few minutes if you have questions that didn't get answered. Thanks, ladies.
Yeah, and if you see me at the EOS conference, say hi.
There you go.
Oh, we're in the wrong spot. I have the...
Yeah, and I'm always happy to answer questions. So if anybody wants to reach out, get on my calendar, happy to. We're a Give First, EOS Worldwide Give First organization. So I talk to people all the time, do a lot of coaching on the side, and love to help out and make a difference. So happy to open that conversation.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.